नमस्ते एवरीवन, बोलिए सत्य सनातन वैदिक धर्म की जय। और आज हम क्योंकि वीकडे है, आज हम अपना कोर्स हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडियन फिलोसफी वो पूरा करेंगे। आपने जन्माष्टमी कैसे मनाई ये बता सकते हैं? मंदिर गए कि नहीं गए? एंड क्या आप साउथ में हैं? साउथ में यूजुअली द डेट्स आर नॉट सेम। साउथ में मैंने देखा था कि जन्माष्टमी का जो डेट है वो एक महीने बाद आएगा, नॉर्थ में पहले आ गया। एंड बहुत धूमधाम से आपने बनाई होगी। तब तक मैं ये प्रिपरेशन कर लेता हूँ विच इज़ वेरी वेरी नेसेसरी कि आपको आवाज़ पूरी क्लियर आए। मैंने बहुत अच्छे से मनाई। और हमने ये जो 3 दिन है, 3 दिन में वी कंप्लीटेड द डिस्कोर्स ऑन श्रीमद् भागवत गीता। ऑब्वियसली कंप्लीट चैप्टर 1 से लेके हम चैप्टर 18 तक कंप्लीट भगवत गीता समापन करेंगे, अगर भगवान इजाज़त दें तो। क्योंकि कुछ चीज़ें ऐसी हुई हैं ड्यूरिंग द लाइफ दैट आई फाउंड दैट इट वाज इनह्यूमन इंटरवेंशन। तो चलिए स्टार्ट करते हैं। हम सांख्य योग में थे, सांख्य एंड योगा। दिस इज क्लास 38, सांख्य एंड योगा क्लास पार्ट 3। जो क्लास 38 है दैट इंक्लूड्स ऑल डिफरेंट स्कूल्स। तो हम हर डिफरेंट स्कूल की अलग अलग चैप्टराइजेशन में बात करेंगे। सांख्य एंड योग फिलॉसफी जो है वो हम डिटेल में पढ़ेंगे, और ताकि वी अंडरस्टैंड द सेम थिंग इन डिटेल। एंड ये इंडियन नॉलेज सिस्टम्स में भी इट इज आस्क्ड इन डिटेल, राइट? बट द कंटेंट ऑफ द षष्टी तंत्र as given in Ahirbuddhanya Samhita is different from it, and it appears that from it that the Sankhya and the Shasti Tantra referred to in the Ahirbuddhanya Samhita was a theistic character resembling the doctrine of Panchatantra Vaishnavas, and the Ahirbuddhanya Samhita says that Kapila's theory of Sankhya was a Vaishnav one. Vigyan Bhikshu, the great expounder of Sankhya, says in many places of his work, Vigyan Marta Bhashya, that Sankhya was originally theistic, and that the atheistic Sankhya is only a Prodhivada, an exaggerated attempt to show that no supposition of Ishvara is necessary to explain the world process. Though the Mahabharata points out that the difference between the Sankhya and Yoga is this, that the former is atheistic while the latter is theistic. The discrepancy between the two accounts of Shashti Tantra suggests that the original Shashti Tantra, as referred to the Aribandhanya Samhita, was subsequently revised and considerably changed. This supposition is corroborated by the fact that Gunaratna does not mention among the important Sankhya works Shashti Tantra, but Shashti Tantrodhara, revised edition of Shashti Tantra. इसका एक्सप्लेनेशन ये है, द डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ विपर्य, तुष्टि, डिफेक्ट्स ऑफ ऑर्गन्स एंड द सिद्धि आर मेंशन्ड इन द कारिका ऑफ ईश्वर कृष्ण, बट आई हैव ओमिटेड देम, द ऑथर हैज ओमिटेड देम in the account of Sankhya, as these have little philosophical importance. The Vipraya, false knowledge, are five, whereas avidya, ignorance, ashmita, egoism, raga, attachment, and dvesha, antipathy, and abhinavesha, self-love, which are also called tamo, maho, mahamaho, tamishra, and andhat mishra. ये हम पहले पढ़ चुके हैं, नाउ आई रिमेंबर दैट। नाउ हम आगे चलते हैं। प्रोबेबली द अर्लीस्ट षष्ठी तंत्र वाज लॉस्ट इवन बिफोर वाचस्पति's टाइम, यानी कि पहले भी हम देख सकते हैं कि पहले के ज़माने में भी जो भी हम लेख लिखते थे, जो भी हम कोर्सेज करते थे, वो भी लॉस्ट हो जाते थे। तो हमारी आदत पुरानी है कि जब हमें पढ़ने को ज़्यादा किताबें दी जाएं तो हम पढ़ते ही नहीं हैं। तभी लॉस्ट होती है ना। लॉस्ट कैसे होंगी? लॉस्ट तब होंगी अगर मेरे पास किताब है और मैं रोज पढ़ूंगा और मैं आगे जनरेशन तक ट्रांसफर करूंगा, तब तक तो ठीक है। लेकिन कहीं अगर मुझे ये पता लगा कि दूसरों की नॉलेज ज़्यादा अच्छी है और मैं उनकी नॉलेज लेने लग जाऊं, तो दिस एंटायर नॉलेज इज लॉस्ट। कभी भी दूसरों की नॉलेज उनके बेसिस पे बोल के, जैसे वेस्टर्न लोगों ने बोला हमारी नॉलेज बहुत अच्छी है, आप हमारी नॉलेज लीजिए और हम मान गए। लेकिन अगर हम उनके साथ वाद करते तो पता लगता उनकी नॉलेज तो कॉपी पेस्ट है। वी आर ऑलरेडी ऑन अ हायर साइड। If we believe the Shashti Tantra referred to in the Ahir Buddhanya Samhita to be in all essence parts the same work which was composed by Kapila and based faithfully on his teachings, then it has to be assumed that Kapila's Sankhya was theistic. It seems probable that his disciple Asuri tried to popularize it, but it seems that a great change occurred when Panchashikha, the disciple of Asuri, came to deal with it. For we know that his doctrine differed from the traditional one in many important aspects. It is said in Sankhya Karika 70 that the literature was divided by him into many parts. Tena bahudha kartam tantram. The exact meaning of this reference is difficult to guess. It might mean that the original Shashti Tantra was rewritten by him in various treatises. It is a well known fact that most of the schools of Vaishnavas accepted the form of cosmology, which is the same in the sense in this most essential part of the Sankhya cosmology. This justifies the assumption that Kapila's doctrine was probably theistic. But there are few other points of difference between the Kapila and the Patanjali Sankhya Yoga. The only supposition that may be ventured in the Panchasikha probably modified Kapila's work in an atheistic way and passed it to Kapila's work. If this supposition is held reasonable, then we have the three strata of Sankhya. First, atheistic, the detailed of which are lost, but which is kept in a modified form by the Patanjali school of Sankhya. Second, an atheistic one as represented by Panchashikha, and a third atheistic modification as the orthodox Sankhya system. An important change is the Sankhya doctrine seems to have been introduced by Vijnana Bhikshu, 6th century AD, by his treatment of gunas as type of reals. I have myself accepted this interpretation of Sankhya. Yani ki if the author says that he has himself accepted this interpretation of Sankhya as the most rational and philosophical one and have therefore followed it in giving a connected school of the accepted Kapila and the Patanjali school of Sankhya. So that means ये थोड़ा सा आपको टेक्स्ट थोड़ा बायस्ड वे में भी दिखेगा कि जब आप एक स्कूल को एक्सेप्ट करते हो दूसरे स्कूल को एक्सेप्ट नहीं करते हो, ये हमेशा होता है वेन एवर यू आर राइटिंग एनी फिलोसफी। तो ये होता है कि आप एक स्कूल को ही पॉजिटिव मान के अपनी फिलोसफीज आगे बोलते हो। अगर आप दो दो स्कूल को पॉजिटिव मानोगे तो एक्सप्लेनेशंस काफ़ी कंफ्यूजिंग हो जाएंगी। तो इससे इजी ये होता है कि अगर आप एक स्कूल को पॉजिटिव मान के एक स्कूल को ट्रू मान के अपनी एक्सप्लेनेशंस देते हो, तो अगर आप दूसरे स्कूल को ट्रू मानते हैं तो उसकी एक्सप्लेनेशंस एग्जैक्टली विपरीत हो सकती हैं। एंड दैट इज द इजीएस्ट वे टू डिफाइन एनी काइंड ऑफ फिलोसफी। कुछ पॉइंट्स आप इससे ले सकते हैं, कुछ पॉइंट्स ऑफ दूसरे अदर थ्योरी से भी ले सकते हैं, राइट। But it must be pointed out that originally the notion of gunas was applied to different types of good and bad mental states. And then they were supposed in some mysterious way, by mutual increase and decrease, to form the objective world on the one hand and the totality of human psychosis on the other. A systemic explanation of the gunas was attempted in two different lines by Vijnana Bhikshu and the Vaishnava writer Vekata. Venkat. Venkat's philosophy will be dealt in the second volume of the present work. यानी कि इसके second volume में Venkat's philosophy भी आएगी. as the yoga philosophy compiled by Patanjali and commented on by Vyasa, the Vachaspati, and Vijnana Bhikshu agreed with the Sankhya doctrine as explained by Vachaspati and Vijnana Bhikshu. In most points, I have preferred to call them the Kapila and the Patanjali school of Sankhya and have treated them together. A principle which is followed by Haribhadra in the Sudarshan Samuchaya. The other important Sankhya teachings mentioned by Gaudapada are Sanak, Sananda, Sanatana, and Vodhu. Nothing is known about their historicity or doctrines. यानी कि इनके सिर्फ नाम है, उनके historicity and doctrines नहीं है. इमेजिन कीजिए ये सारी चीज़ें हुई कैसे होंगी. इसमें बहुत सारी, अगर आप इस वीडियो को, ये जो पिछले 8 मिनट में मैंने बोला है, या अगर आप थोड़ा डिटेल में जाके देखेंगे, अगर स्लो करके देखेंगे, तो आपको पता लगेगा कि हमारे एट दैट टाइम व्हेन दिस एंटायर टेक्स्ट वर रिटन, आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट बिफोर इंडिपेंडेंस, आप जितना भी टाइम ले सकते हैं, या फिर बिफोर मुगल्स आल्सो आप जितना टाइम ले सकते हैं, उसमें पहले तो हमारे बीच में फाइट्स क्यों नहीं इतनी होती थी. इन टर्म्स ऑफ कॉलेजेस जो एजुकेशन था वो क्यों अभी तक बचा हुआ था, इन टर्म्स के they were only and only relying on their education, and for competition with other colleges they used to have Vad. They didn't used to have Vitand or Jalp. They used to have Vad, and उस वाद संवाद के चक्कर में ही they used to take out some other theories and improve their own theories. लेकिन जब ये साइकिल दोबारा चल रहा है, टेक्निकली द सेम साइकिल इज गोइंग ऑन. हम पहले एक महाशक्ति हुआ करते थे, दैट आर philosophical theories were the ones which many in the world copied, and we, because they copied us, we tried to copy them. नाउ अगर आप ये जो मैं थ्योरी चला रहा हूँ, ये जो मैं सीरीज चला रहा हूँ, ये इसलिए चला रहा हूँ मुझे भी ज्ञान रहे, और जो इस पूरी सीरीज को देख रहा है उसको भी ज्ञान रहे. और अगर ये सीरीज वो कोई भी पूरी कर लेगा, एंड दैट पर्सन विल कम टू नो देयर इज नो पॉइंट इन फाइटिंग ऑफ रिलीजन, कास्ट, कल्चर, जेंडर, राइट. हर एक का अपना रूल है, हर एक का अपना काम है. अगर वो अपना काम अच्छे से कर ले, दैट इज द बेस्ट थिंग दैट द पर्सन कैन डू. सांख्य कारिका, सांख्य सूत्र, वाचस्पति मिश्रा एंड विज्ञान भिक्षु, इस पे एक्सप्लेनेशन है. A word of explanation is necessary as regard my interpretation of the Sankhya Yoga system. The Sankhya Karika is the oldest Sankhya text in which we have commentaries by later writers. The Sankhya Sutra was not referred to by any writer until it was commented upon by Aniruddha, 15th century AD. Even Gunaratna of the 14th century AD, who made allusions to a number of Sankhya works, did not make any reference to the Sankhya Sutra, and no other writer who is known to have flourished before Gunaratna seems to have made any reference to Sankhya Sutra. The natural conclusion, therefore, is that these sutras were probably written sometime after 14th century, but there is no positive evidence to prove that it was so late as a later work as the 15th century. It is said at the end of Sankhya Karika of Ishwar Krishna that the Karikas give an exposition of Sankhya doctrine excluding the refutation of the doctrines of other people, and excluding the parables attached to the original Sankhya work. The Shashti Tantra Shastra. The Sankhya Sutras contains refutations of other doctrines and also a number of parables. It is not probable that these were collected from some earlier Sankhya works, which is now lost to us. It may be that it was done from some later editions of the Shashti Tantra Shastra, Shashti Tantrodhara, as mentioned by Gunaratna, but this is a mere conjecture. There is no reason to suppose that Sankhya doctrine found in the sutras differ in any important way from the Sankhya doctrine as found in the Sankhya Karika. The only point of importance is this, that the Sankhya Sutras hold that when the Upanishads spoke of any absolute pure intelligence, they mean to speak the unity as involved in the class of intelligent Purushas as distinct from the class of the Gunas. As all Purushas were of the nature of pure intelligence, they were spoken of in the Upanishads as one, for they all form the category or class of pure intelligence, and hence may in some sense be regarded as one. This compromise cannot be found in the Sankhya Karika. This is, however, a case of omission and not of difference. Vijnana Bhikshu, the commentator of the Sankhya Sutra, ये आपके एग्जाम में आ सकता है. विज्ञान भिक्षु द कमेंटेटर ऑफ सांख्य सूत्र. कमेंटेटर थे सांख्य सूत्र के, लेकिन वो राइटर नहीं थे. Was more inclined to theistic सांख्या और योगा than the atheistic सांख्या. इंक्लिनेशन में इसमें फर्क ये है कि इन एथिस्टिक जो है, एथिस्टिक मीन्स कि वो भगवान की टेस्टिमनी को नहीं मानते. थीस्टिक मीन्स दे accept the testimony of God, and according to them God exists, according to them Parabrahm hai, and everything that is related or written in Bhagavad Gita is there. Bhagavad Gita में भी अगर आप कल की क्लास देखेंगे, which was there done yesterday, which is class 4 of भगवद गीता, उसमें आप देखेंगे कि उसमें भी सांख्य योग का, सांख्य ट्रेडिशन का नाम आया है. तो ये भी हमने जब पिछली क्लास की थी सांख्य एंड योगा ट्रेडिशन क्लास 2 में भी इसका रिजेम्बलेंस पाया गया था कि इसका नाम भगवद गीता में आता है, महाभारत में इसका नाम दिया गया था. तो वो इतना पुराना ट्रेडिशन है, तो वो थीस्टिक भी हो सकता है, एथीस्टिक ना होके भी, राइट. Vigyan Bhikshu is an interpretation of Sankhya differed on many points from those of Vachaspati, and it is difficult to say who is right. Vigyan Bhikshu has this advantage that he has boldly tried to give interpretations on some difficult points on which Vachaspati remained silent. I refer principally to the nature of the concept of the gunas, which I believe is the most important thing in Sankhya. Vigyan Bhikshu described the gunas as real or super subtle substance, but Vachaspati and Gaudapada, the other commentator of Sankhya Karika, remained silent on the point. इसमें गुणास त्रिगुणा एंड अदर गुणास को भी बोला जा सकता है, एंड द एलिमेंट्स फ्रॉम विच द ह्यूमन बॉडी इज मेड, राइट. There is nothing, however, in their interpretation which would militate against the interpretation of the Vigyan Bhikshu. But yet, while were silent on any definite explanation regarding the nature of the gunas, Bhikshu definitely came forward with a very satisfactory and rational interpretation of their nature. Since no definite explanation of the gunas is found in any other work before Bhikshu, it is quite probable that this matter may not have been definitely worked out before. Neither Charak nor the Mahabharata explains the nature of the gunas, but Bhikshu's interpretation suits succeedingly well all that is known of the manifestations and the workings of gunas in all earlier documents. I have therefore accepted the interpretation of Bhikshus in giving my account on the nature of the gunas. The Karika speaks on the gunas as being the nature of pleasure, pain, and dullness, sattva, rajas, and tamas. It also describes sattva as the being light and illuminating, rajas as the nature of energy and causing motion, and tamas as heavy and obstructing. Vachaspati merely paraphrases the statement of the Karika but does not enter into any further explanation. इसके दो रीज़न हो सकते हैं कि वो राइट भी मांग सकता है, क्योंकि अगर जैसे इफ़ आई एम रीडिंग इट, तो कई चीज़ों की मुझे भी एक्सप्लेनेशंस नहीं पता है, कई चीज़ों की आई एम ऑल्सो वेटिंग फॉर द ऑथर टू गिव द एक्सप्लेनेशन इन द लेटर स्टेजेस. एक चीज़ ये भी हो सकती है. सेकेंड चीज़ ये भी हो सकती है कि they accept the testimony. If they are accepting the testimony, तो इसमें problem ही नहीं है. They are accepting the same thing and they are commenting on various other things as well. That is how the entire philosophy works. Right. It also describes sattva uh, as light and illuminating. That is why जो साधु संत है, they are maximum with sattva. तमस उनमें बिल्कुल नील होता है, तभी उन्हें नींद नहीं आती है. अर्जुन जो थे उनमें उन्होंने निद्रा को अपने वश में इसीलिए किया होता बिकॉज दे हैड वेरी लेस ऑफ तमस. रजस था, रजस वाज देयर बिकॉज दे वर फाइटर्स, राइट. Bhikshu's interpretation fits in well with all that is known of the gunas, though it is quite impossible that this view might not have been known before. And when the original Sankhya doctrine was formulated, there was a real vagueness as to the conception of the gunas. There are some other points in which Bhikshu's interpretation differs from that of Vachaspati. The most important of these may be mentioned here. The first is the nature of the connection of the Buddhi state with the Purusha. Vachaspati holds that there is no contact, samayoga, of any Buddhi state with the Purusha, but that a reflection of the Purusha is caught in the state of Buddhi, by virtue of which the Buddhi state becomes intelligized and transformed into consciousness. But this view is open to the objection that it does not explain how the Purusha can be said to be the experiencer of the conscious states of Buddhi, for its reflection in the buddhi is merely an image, and there cannot be an experience bhog on the basis of that image alone without any actual connection of the purusha with the buddhi. The answer of Vachaspati Mishra is that there is no contact of the two in the space and time, but that their proximity, sannidhi, means only a specific kind of fitness, yogayata, by virtue of which the Purusha, though it remains aloof, is yet felt to be united and identified in the Buddhi. And as a result of the state of Buddhi appears as ascribed to a person, Vigyan Bhikshu differs from Vachaspati and says that if such a special kind of fitness is admitted, then there is no reason why Purusha should be deprived of such a fitness at the time of emancipation, and thus there would be no emancipation at all. For the fitness being in the Purusha, he could not be divested of it, and he would continue to enjoy the experiences represented in the Buddhi forever. Vigyan Bhikshu thus holds that there is a real contact of the Purusha with the Buddhi state in any cognitive state. Such a contact of the Purusha and the Buddhi does not necessarily mean that former will be liable to change on account of it. For contact and change are not synonymous. Change means the rise of new qualities. It is the buddhi which suffers changes, and when these changes are reflected in the Purusha, there is the notion of a person or experiencer in the Purusha. And when the Purusha is reflected back in the Buddhi states appears as a conscious state. The second is the difference between the Vachaspati and Bhikshu as regards to the nature of the perception process. Bhikshu thinks that the senses can directly perceive the determinate qualities of things without any intervention of manas, whereas Vachaspati ascribed to manas the power of arranging the sense data in a definite order and of making the indeterminate sense data determinate. With him, the first stage of cognition is the stage when indeterminate senses materials are first represented. At the next stage, there is assimilation, differentiation, and association by which the indeterminate material are ordered and classified by the activity of manas called samkalpa, which coordinates the indeterminate sense materials into determinate perception and conceptual forms as class notion with particular characteristics. Bhikshu, who supposes that that the determinate character of things is directly perceived by the senses, has necessarily has necessity to assign a subordinate position to Manas as being only the faculty of desire, doubt, and imagination. It may not be out of place to mention here that there are one or two passages in Vachaspati's commentary on the Sankhya Karika which seems to suggest that he considers the ego, ahankara, as producing the subjective series of the senses and the objective series of the external world by a sort of desire or will. But he will not work out this doctrine, and it is therefore not necessary to enlarge upon it. इन्होंने बेसिकली कैसे आप चीज़ों को देखते हैं और बुद्धि के ऊपर, द नॉलेज, उसके ऊपर कमेंट्रीज की थी। कैसे हम चीज़ों को देखते हैं? ऑब्वियसली अभी तो हम जानते हैं कि हम आँखों से देखते हैं एंड इमेज उल्टी बनती है, देन ब्रेन प्रोसेसेस इट एंड वी गेट टू नो द सेम थिंग। बट हम थोड़ा सा और इसको डीप में अगर समझने की कोशिश करें कि अगर जैसे मेरे आगे फ़ोन है, फ़ोन कौन सी कंपनी का है, कौन सा फ़ोन है, अब ये तो हमारी प्रीवियस नॉलेज के ऊपर ही डिपेंड करेगा। जो भी हमारी प्रीवियस नॉलेज होगी उसी चीज़ पे ये चीज़ डिपेंड करेगी कि what we are perceiving, how we are perceiving and how we are dealing with the same. जैसे ही हम वो सारी चीज़ों को अंडरस्टैंड करने लगेंगे, वो सारी चीज़ों को भांपने लगेंगे, we'll get a complete image of that thing. That is what they are talking about. वाचस्पति वाचस्पति टोल्ड के मनस भी होता है, भिक्षु जो थे वो कहते थे कि नहीं, जो चीज़ होती है वो ही अपने आप को कॉग्निट करती है। अगर हमारे आगे झाड़ू पड़ा है तो झाड़ू ऐसा है इसलिए हम देख पा रहे हैं, लेकिन वाचस्पति कह रहे हैं कि झाड़ू अगर हम देखते हैं तो उसमें क्योंकि उसकी तीलियां आगे है, किस टाइप का झाड़ू है, ये हमारे पूर्व कॉन्शियसनेस में, प्रीवियस कॉन्शियसनेस में था। दैट इज व्हाई वी आर एबल टू आइडेंटिफाई द सेम, राइट? It may not be out of place to mention here that there are one or two passages. There is also a difference of view with regard to the evolution of tanmatras from the Mahat, for contrary to the view of Vyasa Bhashya and Vigyan Bhikshu, etc. Vachaspati holds that from the Mahat there was Ahamkara, and from the Ahamkara the Tanmatras. ये पतंजलि में दोबारा आएगा। Vigyan Bhikshu, however, holds that both the separation of Ahankara and the evolution of the Tanmatras take place in the Mahat. And as this appeared to be more reasonable, I have followed this interpretation. There are some other minor points of difference between the yoga doctrine between Vachaspati and Bhikshu. There are which are not uh, of much philosophical importance. आगे हम पढ़ते हैं योग एंड पतंजलि, antiquity of yoga. The word yoga occurs in the Rig Veda in various senses such as yoking or harnessing, achieving the unachieved connection and the like. The sense of yoking is not so frequent as the other senses, but it is nevertheless true that the word was used in this sense in Rig Veda and such later Vedic works as Stapata Brahmana and the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad. The word has another derivative yugya in later Sanskrit literature. योकिंग और हार्नेसिंग यानी कि जब हम अपनी ही एनर्जी को कंप्लीट अपने फुल पोटेंशियल पे लाते हैं। इसका एक छोटा सा एग्जांपल, जब आप ब्रीदिंग प्रैक्टिसेस करते हैं तो आप अपनी लंग्स को अपनी फुल एनर्जी पे, फुल वॉल्यूम तक लेके आते हैं। दैट इज द बेसिक्स ऑफ योगा for meditating, for meditating the breathing. वैसे ही अगर आप बॉडी की एक्सरसाइजेस करते हैं एंड वेरियस अदर थिंग्स, तो उस केस में भी अगर आप वर्कआउट करते हैं तो आप अपनी बॉडी की क्षमताओं को मैक्सिमम हार्नेस करते हैं, आप अपनी बॉडी की क्षमता को मैक्सिमम उस मैक्सिमम लेवल पे लेके जाते हैं, राइट? With the growth of religious and philosophical ideas in Rig Veda, we find that the religious austerities were generally very much valued. Tapas, asceticism, and brahmacharya, the holy vow of celibacy and lifelong study, were regarded as greatest virtues and considered as being productive of the highest power. विच इज़ ट्रू कि जब हम भगवत गीता पढ़ रहे थे 9th चैप्टर में, तो हमने देखा था कि एक बच्चा जब अपनी एजुकेशन पूरी कर रहा होता है तो उसे भी सेलिबेसी ही करनी चाहिए, एंड दैट इज हाउ दे आर ट्रेन्ड वेल. That is the sole difference between a person who is actually preparing for IAS, IPS, and government jobs, and the person who is just making fun of that by just preparing, or just making others view that he is preparing or she is preparing, right? So, were regarded as greatest virtues and considered as being productive of the highest power. As these ideas of asceticism and self-control grew, the force of the flying passions was felt to be as uncontrollable as that of the spirited steed. And thus the word yoga, which was originally applied to the control of steeds, began to be applied to the control of the senses, right? In Panini's time, the word yoga had attained the technical meaning, and he distinguished this root yuj samudho. Yuj is in the sense of concentration from yujir yoge. Root is yujir in the sense of connecting. Yuj is the first sense, in the first sense, is seldom used as a verb. It is more or less an imaginary root for the etymological derivation of the word yoga. In the Bhagavad Gita, we find that the word yoga has been used not only in conformity with the root yuja samudho, but also with yujir yoge. This has been the source of some confusion to the readers of Bhagavad Gita. Yogin, in the sense of a person who has lost himself in the meditation, is there regarded as extreme veneration. One of the main features of the use of the word lies in this, that the Bhagavad Gita tried to mark out the middle path between the austere discipline of meditative abstraction on the one hand, and the course of duties of sacrificial action of Vedic worshipper in the life of a new type of yogin, evidently from Yajur Yogi on the other, who should combine in himself the best part of the two paths, devote himself to his duties, and yet abstract himself from all selfish motives associated with desires. भगवद गीता में ये एक्सप्लेनेशन का मतलब यही था कि किस कंटेक्स्ट में वो सारा जो ज्ञान है वो मिल रहा है. वो कंटेक्स्ट अभी का सेम कंटेक्स्ट है. अगर आप अपने ही इंडिया कंट्री की डिफरेंट सिचुएशंस देखेंगे, 1947 पाकिस्तान एक्सोडस, देन उसके बाद बांग्लादेश एक्सोडस, देन उसके बाद 92 जम्मू कश्मीरी पंडित एक्सोडस, देन उसके बाद अजमेर 92, अजमेर 92, देन उसके बाद वेस्ट बंगाल, देन उसके बाद दिल्ली, देन उसके बाद there were many other things which were not reported from South India as well. Even if we are looking at, many people are silently going to Saudi Arabia, and ये अभी की news है which they are silently converted to Muslims because of obvious reasons. वहाँ पे हम multiple wives रख सकते हैं, and by just 3 talaq you can just get rid of them. And again, this is in response to the laws that are there in India and prevalent in India. तो उस वक्त जब धर्म युद्ध चल रहा था, उसमें इट वॉज नॉट ओनली योगा बट ऑल्सो द एक्शन. क्योंकि उन्होंने अर्जुन को, अगर वो सिर्फ बताते कि सिर्फ योग करो, वो तो योगा करने बैठ जाते हैं. लेकिन नहीं, दे इट हैड टू बी मिडिल पाथ. दैट मीन्स दैट पर्सन हैज टू डू हिज ड्यूटी फुल्ली. फॉर डू हिज ड्यूटी फुल्ली मतलब जब वो अर्जुन जी अपना गांडीव रख के बैठ गए थे, उस टाइम तो गांडीव दोबारा उठाने की जरूरत थी. गांडीव नहीं उठेगा तो युद्ध कैसे होगा. बट ही ऑल्सो गेव सर्टेन एक्सप्लेनेशंस के अगर आप नहीं उठाओगे तो आपके भाई हैं, आपके भ्राता हैं, जो माता को वचन देके आए हैं, तो वो तो युद्ध करेंगे, राइट. तो वो उस परिवेश में जो ये एजुकेशन था, क्योंकि हमारी जो एजुकेशन, उसका कंटेक्स्ट इसलिए बताया जाता है कि हम उस कंटेक्स्ट में उस थ्योरी को अपनाएं. इसीलिए इसमें बोला गया है कि योगिन जो इसमें बोला गया, योगिन इज नॉट ओनली कि वो योग कर रहा है, इट इज ऑल्सो कि वो अपनी ड्यूटीज का निर्वाह भी कर रहा है, अपना जो उसका कार्य है वो भी कंप्लीट कर रहा है, राइट. Kautilya in his Arthashastra, when enumerating the philosophical science of study, names Samkhya, Yoga, and Lokayata, the oldest Buddhist sutras. Example, the Satipatthana Sutta are fully familiar are fully familiar with the stages of yoga concentration. We may thus infer that self-concentration and yoga had developed as a technical method of mystic absorption sometime before the Buddha. यानी कि ये टेक्निक्स ऑफ योगा वर ऑलवेज बिफोर. हम इसका उल्लेख शिव महापुराण में भी देखते हैं, जिसमें देव तांत्रिक विद्या एंड जब भगवान महादेव योग का ज्ञान देते हैं टू माता सती, टू माता पार्वती, when she came again just to get her indriyas back, just to get her powers back, just to get her body strong enough to absorb all the powers. ये आप महादेव महापुराण में भी देख सकते हैं और देवों के देव महादेव में भी देख सकते हैं कि वो किस प्रकार से योगा सिखाते हैं. तो it's a old technique. As regards the connection of yoga with Samkhya, as we find it in the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, it is indeed difficult to come to any definite conclusion. The science of breath had attracted notice to many of the early Upanishads, though there had not probably developed any systematic form of pranayama, a system of breath control of the yoga system. It is only when we come to Maitreya that we find that uh, yoga method had attained a systematic development. The other two Upanishads in which the yoga ideas cannot be traced are the Shvetara in and which the yoga ideas can be traced are the Shvetara and the Katha. It is indeed curious to notice that these three Upanishads of Krishna Yajurveda, where we find reference to yoga method, are the only ones where we find clear references also to the Sankhya tenets. Though the Sankhya and Yoga ideas do not appear there as related to each other, are associated as parts of the same system. But there is a remarkable passage in the Maitrayani in the conversation between Shakyayana and Brihadrata, where we find that Sankhya metaphysics was offered in some quarters to explain the validity of the yoga process, and it seems therefore that the association and grafting of Sankhya metaphysics on the yoga system as its basis was the work of the following of this school of ideas, which was subsequently systemized by Patanjali. इसमें सांख्या मेटाफिजिक्स इसलिए बोला गया है, फिजिक्स वो जो आप देख पाते हो, मेटाफिजिक्स वो जो आप नहीं देख पाते हो. तो there are many things which happen in our body, there are many functions that happen in our body which are not explained by any of the science, but some of the science is being explained with the help of Ayurveda, and with this Ayurveda के बाद ही आपका जो हम एलोपैथी बोलते हैं वो उसका जन्म हुआ होगा, जो कि इट वाज अ इंडियन ट्रेडिशन एज वेल. हु वाज द फाउंडर ऑफ दैट, ये आप ढूंढ के जरूर बताएं, राइट. तो योग करते समय कई बार कुछ चीजें ऐसी हो जाती हैं जो फिजिक्स के जो हम सामने देखते हैं उसके मापदंड में नहीं होती हैं. जैसे many of the people, many of the sadhus who have controlled over their breath, senses and various other things, तो वो you will see them actually controlling the air, you will see them controlling the all the natural sources. हम सोचते हैं कि these are the प्रकृति जो है that is ever changing. Yes, it is ever changing, but can it be controlled by human brain? Yes, if we use it to its fullest potential with the help of yoga. Thus, Shakyayana says here some say it is the guna which through the difference of nature goes into bondage to the will, and that deliverance takes place when the fault of the will has been removed. where because he sees that sees by the mind and all that we can desire, imagination, doubt, belief, unbelief, certainty, uncertainty, shame, thought, fear, all that is but mind, carried along by the waves of the qualities, darkened in his imagination, unstable, fickle, crippled, full of desires, vacillating. He enters into belief, believing I am he. This is mine, and he binds his self by the self as a bird with a net. Therefore, a man being possessed of will, imagination, and belief is a slave, but he who is opposite is free. For the reason, let a man stand free from will, imagination, and belief. This is the sign of liberty. This is the path that leads to Brahman. This is the opening of the door, and through it he will go to the other shore of darkness. All desires are thus fulfilled, and for this they quote a verse: when the five instruments of knowledge stand still together with the mind, and when the intellect does not move, this is called the highest state. यानी कि आपकी पांचों इंद्रियां हैं वो आपके वश में हैं, और जो आपका मन है वो स्थिर है, तब आपकी हाईएस्ट स्टेट है फॉर मेडिटेशन. तभी योग में पांचों इंद्रियों को कंट्रोल करना सिखाया जाता है. और उसके बाद अपने पहले तो अपने मन को स्थिर रखना सिखाया जाता है. तो मैनी अ टाइम्स हम कोई कार्य कर रहे हैं तो उसमें हम किसी और चीज़ के बारे में ना सोचें, पहले तो ये सिखाया जाता है. फिर उसके बाद सिखाया जाता है कि हम पांचों इंद्रियां कैसे अपने वश में करें, पांचों इंद्रियां कैसे हम कंट्रोल कर पाएं. Vatsayana, however, in his Bhashya or Nyaya Sutra, distinguishes Samkhya from Yoga in the following way. The Samkhya holds that nothing can come into being nor be destroyed. There cannot be any change in the pure intelligence, Nirita Shaya Chetana. All changes are due to changes in the body, the senses, the manas, and the objects. Yoga holds that all creation is due to karma of the Purusha. Doshas, passions, and the pravritti, action, are the cause of karma. The intelligence or soul's chetana are associated with qualities. Non-beings can come into being, and what is produced may be destroyed. The last view is indeed quite different from the yoga of Vyasa. It is closer to Nyaya in its doctrines. If Vatsyayana's statement is correct, it would appear that the doctrine of there being a moral purpose in creation was borrowed by Sankhya from Yoga. Udyat Udyotkara's remark on the same sutra do not indicate a difference, but an agreement between the Sankhya and Yoga on the same sutra do not indicate a difference between agreement between Sankhya and Yoga on the doctrine of Indriyas being bhautika. Curiously enough, Vatsayana quotes a passage from Vyasa Bhashya in his Bhashya and criticizes the self-contradictory Viruddha. वात्सायन ऋषि का काम शास्त्र भी था. आई थिंक आप उसको भी देख सकते हैं. द ओरिजिनल वात्सायन ऋषि का काम शास्त्र वॉज डिस्ट्रॉयड, ओनली हाफ ऑफ द पार्ट फ्रॉम द साउथ वॉज प्रिजर्व. पता नहीं नॉर्थ वालों में ही क्या प्रॉब्लम है कि वो अपनी कल्चर के अगेंस्ट ज़्यादा जाते हैं. एंड प्रॉबेबली या वो कंफ्यूज होंगे कि या वो युद्ध लड़ें या अपने ग्रंथ बचाएं. कुड बी एनीथिंग, राइट? An examination of such yoga Upanishads as Shandilya, Yoga Tattva, Dhyan Bindu, Hamsa, Amartanada, Varaha, Mandala, Brahmana, Nababindu, Yoga Kundali shows that yoga practices had undergone diverse changes in diverse schools, but none of these show any predilection of the Sankhya. Thus, the yoga practices grew in accordance with the doctrines of the Shaivas and the Shaktas and assumed a peculiar form or as the mantra yoga. They grew in another direction as the Hatha yoga, which was supposed to produce mystical and magical feats through constant practices of elaborate nervous exercises, which were also associated with healing and other supernatural powers. The Yoga Tattva Upanishad says that there are four kinds of yoga: the Mantra Yoga, Laya Yoga, Hatha Yoga, and Raja Yoga. In some cases, we find that there was a great attempt even to associate Vedantism with this mystical practices. The influence of these practices in the development of Tantra and other modes of worship was also very great, but we have to leave out these from our present considerations as they have little philosophical importance and as they are not connected with the present endeavor. तो हम पतंजलि आगे कंटिन्यू करेंगे. अभी हम इस चीज को समझ जाते हैं कि जब हम देखते हैं कि कोई और थ्योरीज इसमें इन्वॉल्व हो रही हैं या कोई और थ्योरीज इसमें एक्सप्लेन की जा रही हैं, तो उस केस में मेजर पॉइंट ये बनता है कि अगर आप कोई चीज अनुसंधान कर रहे हैं तो यू हैव टू लुक इनटू वेरियस अदर थ्योरीज. योग योग अगर हम बेसिक सिर्फ योग फिलॉसफी को देखें तो उस केस में वट जो भी आप अपने, जैसे अभी इसमें स्टार्टिंग में बताया गया था द मीनिंग ऑफ योग. द मीनिंग ऑफ योग इज कि आप कुछ ना कुछ यू आर हार्नेसिंग energies from within. When you are harnessing energies from within, then you have to look into various other theories, और different theories क्या क्या बताती हैं ये भी आपको बोलना पड़ेगा. Of the Patanjali school of Samkhya, from which forms the subject of the yoga with which we are now dealing, Patanjali was probably the most notable person, for he not only collected the different forms of yoga practices and gleaned the diverse ideas which were or could be associated with the yoga, but grafted them all on the Sankhya metaphysics and gave them the form in which they have been handed down to us. यानी कि डिफरेंट कल्चर्स में डिफरेंट काइंड ऑफ योग होता था. जब डिफरेंट कल्चर में डिफरेंट काइंड्स ऑफ योग होता है, डिफरेंट पावर्स होती हैं, डिफरेंट मेटाफिजिक्स है, तो देयर हैज टू बी समवन हु कैन कंट्रोल दैट एंटायर थिंग, पुट दैट एंटायर थिंग इन सिस्टम एंड देन कंपाइल इट. ये सारी चीजें करना बहुत आपको लगता है बहुत इजी है, लेकिन नहीं, कई बार इट इज वेरी डिफिकल्ट बिकॉज यू हैव टू अंडरस्टैंड द मेटाफिजिक्स ऑफ ईच एंड एवरी योग. कई बार आपको वो योग करके देखना पड़ेगा और पता लगे कि हाँ व्हाट इज द इफेक्ट. जैसे many of the yogas are prohibited for pregnant women. Many of the yogas are prohibited for women. Many of the yogas are prohibited for male. Many of the yogas are very good for pregnant women and are very good for female but not good for male. तो ये सारी चीजें हमें ध्यान रखनी पड़ेंगी. पहले भी डिस्क्रिमिनेशन होता था, इन सेंस डिस्क्रिमिनेट नहीं करेंगे तो हम उस पर्टिकुलर बॉडी के अकॉर्डिंग नहीं बना पाएंगे. जैसे सिंपल सी बात है, आप जूते लेते हैं, जूते क्योंकि मास प्रोडक्शन होता है, तो मास प्रोडक्शन में वो डिस्क्रिमिनेट नहीं करते हैं. भैया जूते का नंबर 10 मतलब 10, 10.5 मतलब 10.5, 11 मतलब 11, तो दोनों पेयर आपके सेम लेवल के आएंगे. बट अगर आप पुराने ज़माने में मोची से जूते सिलवाते थे और काफ़ी सस्ते बन जाते थे, तो एक जूता बड़ा होता था, एक छोटा होता था, क्योंकि आपकी बॉडी है ही ऐसी. आपकी बॉडी का अगर आप स्ट्रक्चर आप देखेंगे, दिस हाफ इज डिफरेंट फ्रॉम दिस हाफ. आप ये हाफ को मिरर इमेज ये नहीं बना सकते हो, शक्ल बिल्कुल ही अजीब बनेगी. वैसे ही जो योग है, योग ट्रेडिशन है, उसका मेटाफिजिक्स जो पतंजलि ने किया, पतंजलि से पहले भी महर्षि पतंजलि से पहले भी योग का ट्रेडिशन हुआ करता था. बट योग का क्या इफेक्ट होता है उससे, वो किसके लिए क्या है, जैसे स्वामी रामदेव जी भी डायरेक्टली बता देते हैं कि आपको ये प्रॉब्लम है तो इससे ये होगा. स्वामी रामदेव जी को ये पता है कि क्यों होगा, बट आपको उन्हें ये भी पता है क्योंकि आजकल की रील जनरेशन है, वो इतना सब कुछ सुनना ही नहीं चाहती. ही इज वेरी नॉलेजेबल. स्वामी रामदेव जी जो हैं आपको हर एक एकदम से लिख देते हैं. तभी जो उनके अंडर के जो शिष्य हैं जो आयुर्वेदा पढ़ते हैं, उन्हें रीजन पता होता है कि क्यों ऐसा रीजन है कि इस योग आसन को करने से ये प्रॉब्लम ठीक होगी. बट अ पर्सन, अ लेमैन हु इज गोइंग, उसे अपनी बॉडी के बारे में ही नहीं जानना हो, तो इसे बस ये चाहिए होता है भैया सोल्यूशन बता दो बस. हाँ बस बाकी काम बहुत है, कमाई में लगे हुए हैं, एंड many people don't have. Many people do research, many people do take out time to research, but many people don't, right? Vachaspati and Vigyan Bhikshu, the two great commentators on the Vyasa Bhashya, agree with us in holding that Patanjali was not the founder of the yoga, but an editor. Analytic study of the sutras also bring the conviction that the sutras do not show any original attempt, but a masterly and systematic compilation which has been supplemented by fitting contribution. The systematic manner also in which the first three chapters are written by way of definition and classification shows that materials were already in existence and the Patanjali only systemized it. There was no missionizing zeal, no attempt to overthrow the doctrines of other systems, except as far as they might come in by way of explaining the systems. Patanjali is not even anxious to establish the system, but he is only engaged in systemizing the facts as he had them. Most of the criticism against the Buddhists occur in the last chapter. The doctrines of the yoga are described in the first three chapters, and this part is separated from the last chapter where the views of Buddhists are criticized the putting of an iti, the word to denote the conclusion of any work. At the end of the third chapter is evidently to denote the conclusion of yoga compilation. There is, of course, another iti at the end of fourth chapter to denote the conclusion of the whole work. The yoga writer Jaggi Shavya wrote Dharan Shastra, which dealt with yoga more in the fashion of Tantra than that given by Patanjali. He mentioned different places in the body, example, heart, throat, tip of nose, palate, forehead, center of the brain, which are centers for memory, where concentration is to be made. See Vachaspati's Tatparyatika or Vatsayana's Bhashya or Nyaya Sutras. So, one of the people, which was Shesava, wrote Dharan Shastra, जिन्होंने ये बोला था कि बॉडी, हार्ट, थ्रोट, टिप ऑफ नोज, पैलेट, फोरहेड, सेंटर ऑफ द ब्रेन, ये भी ऐसी चीज़ें हैं जो हमारी नॉलेज को, हमारे ब्रेन, हमारी मेमोरी को धारण करती है. There is, of course, the most legitimate hypothesis seem to be that the last chapter is a subsequent addition by a hand other than that of Patanjali, who was anxious to supply some new links on argument which were felt to be necessary for the strengthening the yoga position from an eternal internal point of view, as well as for securing the strength of the yoga from the supposed attack of Buddhist metaphysics. There is also a marked change due either to the supplementary character or the manipulation of a foreign hand in the style of the last chapter as compared with the style of the other three. The sutras 30 to 434 of the last chapter seem to repeat what has already been said in the second chapter, and some of the topics introduced are such that they could well have been dealt with in a more relevant manner in connection with similar discussions in the preceding chapters. The extent of this chapter is also disproportionately small as it contains only 34 sutras, whereas the average number of sutras in other chapters is 51 to 55. चलिए अब हम बाकी नेक्स्ट क्लास जो कि कल हम पूरा करेंगे. आई होप आज की क्लास आपको पसंद आई हो. ये सांख्य एंड योगा काफ़ी डिटेल में है और अभी पतंजलि के ऊपर और चीज़ें बाकी हैं, जिसमें प्रोफेसर J.H. वुड्स ऑफ हार्वर्ड यूनिवर्सिटी ने क्या कहा ये भी आएगा. महाभाष्य, व्यास भाष्य, नागार्जुना एंड पूरी डिटेल ऑफ पतंजलि आएगी. which will take a lot more time. We will be completing the same tomorrow. एंड उसके बाद सांख्य एंड योगा डॉक्ट्रिन ऑफ सोल एंड पुरुषा ये भी आएगा. आई थिंक दिस इज वेरी वेरी डिटेल्ड चैप्टर. इसके बाद न्याय वैशेषिका आएगा. तो न्याय वैशेषिका फिलोसफी चैप्टर 8 है. चैप्टर 7 वी स्टिल हैव मेनी मोर पेजेस टू गो. Approximately it will take 3 to 4 more classes in detail. क्या पता एक पूरा हफ्ता चले. हम भगवत गीता जो है वो संडे टू संडे रिज्यूम करेंगे अनटिल अनलेस कोई छुट्टी आती है एंड वी हैव पब्लिक वेकेशन. उसमें जो भी वेकेशन होगा उसमें हम भगवत गीता को पूरे क्योंकि बिकॉज इट इज इन डिटेल. मैं भगवत गीता को एवरी 1 आवर नहीं देखता हूँ. मैं भगवत गीता को देखता हूँ जितना भगवान चाहे मुझसे बुलवा ले. जितनी मेरी इच्छा है तब तक. मेरी इच्छा क्या, भगवान की इच्छा ही है तब तक. आपको ये सीरीज कैसी लग रही है आप मुझे बताएं. अगर आप ये वीडियो पहली बार देख रहे हैं तो आप ध्यान दीजिए. ये एक पूरी प्लेलिस्ट का पार्ट है. प्लेलिस्ट इज हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडियन फिलोसफी. हम 2 प्लेलिस्ट अभी चला रहे हैं, हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडियन फिलोसफी एंड द अदर वन वाज ऑन भगवत गीता, जिसमें मैं भगवत गीता जो गीता प्रेस से इंग्लिश वर्जन है उसको वर्ड बाय वर्ड पढ़ाता हूँ. एंड आई ऑल्सो गिव द एक्सप्लेनेशन इन टूडेज वर्ल्ड एज वेल. सिमिलरली हिस्ट्री ऑफ इंडियन फिलोसफी भी आज के ज़माने में कि हाउ द थिंग्स आर चेंजिंग, हाउ द थिंग्स आर कैन बी कंसिडर्ड और अंडरस्टूड, ये सारी चीज़ें हम देखते हैं. आप अपने राय ज़रूर लिखिए. मैं मिलता हूँ आपको कल यानी कि नेक्स्ट वीडियो में. जय श्री राम.